New videos every day. Psyche Truth. Life. Wisdom.
And because of that, because we have this sense of separation, there's a tendency in American culture to treat other people like transactions.
I'm Psyche Truth correspondent Karina Rachel. Thank you for tuning in to The Truth Talks. I'm joined today by Sean Blackwell, founder of the channel Bipolar or Waking Up. And today we're talking about the benefits of transpersonal psychology. So Sean, will you begin with just giving us a maybe kind of brief description of transpersonal psychology? Of course, we covered it in its own entire video, so people can go to that video if they want more information. But maybe you can just kind of give us a recap before we get started.
Okay, just a quick explanation is that you could think of traditional, typical psychology that you would get basically across America as a process of developing your own personal ego, sort of making you a sort of independent person who can think rationally for themselves and not really be swayed too much by superstitious thoughts or strange beliefs that might be coming in from outside influences. You know, the whole focus of traditional psychology is to get you to that sort of mature, rational self, okay? And, you know, for our purposes here, we can call that personal psychology, personal consciousness. Transpersonal psychology is about going beyond that, and it's literally taking the ego boundaries that we've created for ourselves with this sort of healthy adult ego, and then starting to take them down, realizing that in a sense, even though the ego gives us structure, that it's also sort of the false self of who we are. And the more we can sort of take little pieces of our ego and sort of set them aside, it makes us more open, transparent, and gives us a better ability to connect with other people.
Okay. So I guess let's just get started. What would be the benefits of this transpersonal psychology as opposed to maybe the more traditional psychology, what you kind of referred to as personal psychology?
Okay. Well, I'd say that traditional psychology is getting you ready for the modern world, which is about, you know, to a large extent, competition, right? And sort of trying to move up the corporate ladder of social status and whatnot and power. Traditional psychology is really about, you know, having you get your way get your way fairly, not by breaking the rules of society, but having you work to succeed, but with the sense of separation, like you're sort of going against everybody else. And because of that, because we have this sense of separation, there's a tendency in American culture to treat other people like transactions, okay? So the most obvious example is like at a fast food restaurant, you know, it's like, welcome to McDonald's, may I help you? And, you know, the person is not engaged with you. They're not looking at you. The tone of their voice, they're just monotone. They're just doing that to get their job done, you know. And in, you know, more complex situations, like if you're, for example, an executive or you work in the government, you often have relationships with your coworkers that are quite cold and sterile because you sort of have this competitive attitude regarding who you're working for. Everybody's sort of trying to struggle to climb their way to the top, like a rat race, right? Now, the trouble is, this is okay for surviving. You know, it puts food on the table, and you know, in a dog-eat-dog world, that's the way many people think you need to be. But if you're using transpersonal psychology to sort of help identify your ego boundaries, and then sort of taking those boundaries down a piece at a time, realizing the parts of your life that don't really serve you, okay? Like, okay, I'm a big successful executive, but this job is making me feel dead. And then you change jobs, for example. That would be a nice move in transpersonal psychology, for example, when you're in a career that no longer really serves you in the sense that it makes you feel like a fake or a fraud, okay? To sort of step away from a career like that into something that might even pay less but is more meaningful for you. You know?
So you kind of put your ego aside to kind of pay attention to what your real feelings are, aside from how it makes you look to you know, externally to other people.
Exactly. And that's like when you said feelings, not impulsive feelings like, wow, look at that girl, you know, not like that, or, oh, I want to go gamble. Those are sort of the lower impulses, but intuitive feelings like, wow, wouldn't it be great if I could do this? But I can't because I need my money to survive, But it's really following those intuitive vibes that make us really heroic in our lives and bring a greater sense of aliveness, which I think a lot of people are striving for,
Right. Well, I think that you make a really important point, which is that a lot of us do kind of feel in our lives like we're just going through the motions. I have to, I really want to have this prestigious job so that I can, be real impressive, and I want to make this amount of money. And we kind of create this sense of ourselves with a bunch of materialistic things that kind of have nothing to do with us. As opposed to maybe looking at like, well, what is the real essence of myself? What is the thing that I really want, that really drives me? We talk a lot about on this channel about, reaching our potential and fulfilling ourselves. And, what does it mean to really feel fulfilled and feel really happy with, what you're doing and what you have in life, that's not just based on, well, other people think I'm really rich and successful, just as an example.
And I think to a certain extent, both of us are here because of a sort of soul calling that, this just feels right. It feels great for you to be a correspondent on Psych Truth. It feels great for me to do bipolar waking up work. I can't speak to your salary, but man, I'm not doing this for the money, okay?
Me neither.
Yeah, but it feels right. And I spent years in advertising, good at it, but feeling like a bit of a fraud, like this really isn't me, and striving to find a way to survive and get out of that at the same time. And fortunately, I found a nice exit. But and I owe transpersonal psychology that to a large extent because it taught me to really trust my intuition.
Right. And I was very much in the same situation, Sean, where I was working a job in finance. It was really good pay, great benefits, great job security. They loved me. And I just had this feeling in my heart like, this is a job that I just really can't continue doing anymore. It doesn't fulfill me. It doesn't make me really happy. And even though I had a lot of that financial security, of course, my parents were thrilled with me working that job. I kind of had this intuition, you could call it, that this really wasn't what I wanted to be doing. And now that I have found Psyche Truth, I know that, this is really what fulfills me. Yeah. What I really like doing, I really like, you mentioned earlier, being able to reach out to people and you have more of a relationship with people rather than just seeing people as a transaction. And that, especially since I was working in finance, maybe even holds more true in my situation because I was just constantly living in dollar signs and invoice numbers. And I didn't really have a personal interaction with people the way that I've gained through the work I do on Psyche Truth.
And like, for example, my job after advertising was working as an English teacher in Brazil. And I thought I would be completely bored with this after a couple of years and probably go back into marketing. But what happened was I had the opportunity to really connect with people as a private English teacher that I really enjoyed. It felt like a lot of fun. And I continue doing that to this day. It pays the bills and people would be surprised. They think often that, well, I need this much money to survive. They've got that in their head. But I can honestly say, 12, 13 years after leaving advertising, that I've always been able to do what I've wanted to do following my intuitive voice. The bank account might say zero, but that somehow has never stopped me from doing, what's been in my heart.
Right. So let's delve into some of these other benefits of transpersonal psychology that you had mentioned. You kind of talked about seeing people as people rather than seeing them as transactions. And especially when we're talking about the field of mental health and things like that, often the sensation that we get in the kind of mainstream handling of mental health, for instance, is that it's not real personal. I've known several people who say, I will see my psychiatrist for a couple of minutes. I don't even think they know me or anything about me. It seems very impersonal.
Sure. Yeah, and I talk to people online all the time about their experiences with psychiatry. And basically, you sit down there for 15 minutes, they give you a prescription and $300 to the insurance company. And, many people feel like they're just cattle in a sense when they go to psychiatry. And when we work with people, my wife and I have worked with some people voluntarily, and I'm just starting to work with people on a paid basis. We treat that person as a partner. We are partners in their healing process, and really it's the person who is with the bipolar disorder. If they're really mature and ready for it, they're the ones that are leading the healing process, and we act more like a midwife. It's like someone who's giving rebirth to yourself, and we're just there to protect you, make you feel safe, and make sure the baby doesn't drop. Something like that.
And I think that's an interesting point you make, because I think that pretty much anyone, certainly anybody living in America, can kind of understand this feeling that we're just transactions, we're just consumers. It's just about what we can buy, what material possessions we have. And so this perpetual feeling that we're kind of dehumanized and all we are is what we spend money on and all we are is what we buy. What is it about modern society that kind of maybe drives that division between people so that we feel less like a person and feel like maybe, the only thing that matters is our role as a consumer, is our role in being able to go out and buy things?
Well, to a certain extent, and I guess the first thing I would say was that modern society does bring its benefits, and we've talked about that already. All the technology in this room is from modern society, so I don't want to knock it entirely, but it's just basically a function of a rational, scientific thinking mind that is going to look at everything as sort of separate from me. The rational mind is good at breaking things down, but it's not particularly good at seeing the whole of the situation. Okay. With transpersonal psychology, there's a recognition that along with the sort of separation, you can see things as separate, but there's also an underlying wholeness to the experience. And in a funny way, you can sort of feel when you're tapping into that wholeness. When a conversation really starts to feel genuine and honest, we have a sense of aliveness in ourselves, our eyes start to brighten up, and funny enough, we lose our sense of time. So if you're in a very meaningful conversation, I would describe it as being in touch with your eternal self, with your true soul. And you'll look down and go, oh my God, have we been here for 2 hours? It feels like 5 minutes. That's a common thing. And Eckhart Tolle talks about that in his famous book, The Power of Now.
Right.
I would describe transpersonal psychology as a process, a therapeutic process that will help you get in touch with the deeper part of yourself, which will deepen your presence with people so that they feel like, and this did happen to me when I was in advertising. After I got out of the psychiatric hospital, people were describing me as being really in the room. Like when Sean's in a meeting, he's really there, he's focused, and he's showing that he cares about our business, beyond the money. It was like, this is important to me, your success is important to me. And they could feel that.
Right.
And before my hospitalization, people were complaining that I was always distracted. I wasn't really there. I didn't really care about our clients. And they were right, because I was feeling sorry for myself. I was sort of depressed in this sort of separated, isolated existence that felt meaningless to me. And with this new perception, you have a life that I think is a lot more meaningful because you start to feel the value of everyday exchanges like this conversation.
Right. So maybe you can give us some other, practical ways. How would you advise somebody to maybe start integrating transpersonal psychology into their life so that they could kind of reap these benefits of being in the moment, being more not only aware of another person, but it's an awareness of ourselves.
Okay.
That makes us, be able to relate with people.
Well, the first is if you're out there and you're feeling like your life is meaningless or your job is meaningless, this is a very modern problem. We call it existential angst. What is the point of being alive? Right. And it sounds like sort of an abstract thing, but when you're in it, it can be a crushing depression.
Certainly.
It can be quite bad. If you're feeling any inkling of that, I'd seek out a transpersonal psychologist and have him help you develop your intuitive self. That's one way to go about it, is through transpersonal psychology. And another way to just help deepen your presence and loosen the ego grip is to meditate. I've talked on previous videos about Vipassana meditation, but pretty much any meditation style will take you into a place where you start to get in touch with a deeper part of yourself, a more sacred self. It starts to slow down that rational ego thought process. And then that just allows you to just sort of jump into the flow of life without a lot of analysis and judgments about who you're dealing with or why. You just sort of get in there, and when you do, life is a lot more fun, it's exciting, spontaneous. Rational people are often not very spontaneous because they're always thinking about their next step. But once you sort of tap into that presence, life becomes a lot easier.
So yeah, I think that it's a common experience that we kind of feel like we're just going through the motions, we're just kind of trudging through, and yeah, this feeling of what's the point, what's the meaning of life, that is I think very, very common, especially in America. So I think that's a very valid and important thing, for people to know about, that there is this whole other kind of, I guess you could say, branch of psychology that really looks at maybe tackling what's at the root of that, and not only tackling it, but figuring out how to resolve it and how to maybe cultivate within ourselves that more aware. And what comes with that is the self-compassion and the self-love. So you start becoming more aware of what is who you really are, outside of, well, I have to do this and I have to take my kids here and I have to do that and I have to make, because we have this internal checklist constantly going in our minds, and it can kind of distract us from who we really are, what we really want, what really drives us and makes us happy.
Yeah, you have a focus that shifts from doing, which is what modern society is all about. I got to do this, the list you're talking about. Got to do this, got to do that. It's like a race to get it all done.
Right.
You shift your focus from doing to being. It's like, how are you doing what you're doing? Are you doing it with resentment, frustration, anxiety, stress? Or are you doing it with a sense of aliveness, humor, pleasure? Is it fun to go to the grocery store? Going to the grocery store can be a lot of fun if you just let it be.
Right.
But if you're just there going, oh my God, I gotta get this done in 15 minutes because I gotta go back to my job, blah blah blah. It does take the life out of your life.
Right. This
like
stress that is imposed on us by having all of these different things.
Well, that you're imposing on yourself, right?
Right.
It's like there's a saying, you are your own slave driver.
Right.
So nobody's forcing anybody to run around like a chicken with their head cut off. Right? The situation is set up for that, but you don't have to do it. I meditate every day, like probably 5 hours a week. It's easy to step out. You just have to want to.
Well, Sean, thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to doing some future videos with you as well.
Thanks, Karina.
Thank you so much for watching. I do hope you have enjoyed this video and that you will give us a thumbs up, and be sure to leave your comment. Let us know what you think about transpersonal psychology, or that just kind of monotonous, going through the motions kind of phenomenon that we've described. Is that something you've experienced yourself? Please be sure to subscribe to the Psyche Truth channel. And if you'd like to subscribe to Sean's channel, you'll see a link to do that as well. I look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you so much for watching.